The wind over Eastern Europe wasn't just cold, it felt hostile. It cut through fabric, through metal, through thought itself, like the landscape was trying to erase anyone who didn't belong there. Inside a forward NATO staging base hidden beneath reinforced camouflage netting, Lieutenant Emma Carter stood still amid controlled chaos. Soldiers moved around her like clockwork, checking weapons, verifying comms, running last-minute briefings. Helicopter rotors thumped somewhere beyond the hangar walls, shaking dust from overhead beams. But Emma didn't react to any of it. Her focus was inward. Sharp, controlled, quiet. She tightened the straps of her tactical vest and felt the familiar pressure settle across her chest, comforting in a strange way. Not safety, just familiarity. This wasn't her first deployment. But something about this one felt different. Heavier. Not officially stated, not written in reports. Just felt. On the table beside her lay a digital briefing tablet, looping fragmented satellite imagery. Red zones, blacked-out comm regions, movement markers that flickered in and out like dying signals. The situation had escalated faster than command predicted. Russian armored advances had pushed deeper into contested territory overnight. Entire reconnaissance units had gone dark without sending extraction confirmation codes. And then came the message that changed everything. A scrambled transmission, intercepted by NATO listening posts. Still alive, grid 14 kilo compromised, we can't hold. Then silence. That was it. No follow-up, no identification confirmation, no guarantee of survival. But enough. Because Emma recognized the transmission pattern. It belonged to a reconnaissance team she had personally trained with during joint operations exercises. People she knew, people who didn't break under pressure. If they had gone silent, something had gone wrong. Very wrong. The command decision. In the command tent, the atmosphere was suffocating. A holographic map flickered across the center table, showing shifting control lines like bleeding fractures across terrain. Officers spoke in clipped tones, urgent, frustrated, divided. Colonel Hayes stood at the head of the room, arms crossed, jaw tight. Emma stood across from him. No helmet. No weapon raised. Just presence. "You understand the situation, Lieutenant," Hayes said. "This is not a reconnaissance gap. This is active Russian-controlled territory with confirmed electronic warfare suppression." Emma didn't blink. "I understand. And you also understand why we are not authorizing any solo insertions." A pause. She replied evenly, "I'm not requesting authorization." That silence hit harder than any argument. Hayes narrowed his eyes. "You're a lieutenant, not a ghost operative. You don't just walk into a war zone alone because of a feeling." "It's not a feeling," she said. "It's confirmation they're alive." "We don't have proof." "You have silence," Emma replied. "And silence from that unit doesn't happen unless something external is forcing it." Another officer stepped in. "Even if you're right, the area is saturated. Drone coverage is unreliable. Ground patrol density is unknown. You'd be walking into blind territory." Emma finally looked at the map. Then back at them. "I've walked into worse." That wasn't arrogance. It was memory. And everyone in that room knew it. Colonel Hayes exhaled sharply. "If you go alone, and if you get caught." "I won't get caught." "And if you die?" Emma interrupted calmly. "Then at least they won't die waiting for something that never came." That ended the argument. Not because it was approved, but because no one had a response strong enough to override it. The unofficial preparation. Night fell fast over the base. Snow began drifting sideways under heavy wind, blurring floodlights into hazy halos. Inside the armory, Emma moved quietly. No announcements. No witness crowd. Just the sound of metal racks and controlled motion. She selected gear with precision. A compact suppressed rifle optimized for cold conditions. Lightweight sidearm, thermal optics, a wrist-mounted mapping interface with offline terrain storage, medical injectors, signal disruption tools. Everything she took had one purpose: survive long enough to complete the objective. A young technician entered the armory and froze when he saw her. "Lieutenant Carter, you're not cleared for field loadout." She didn't look up. "I'm aware." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "If you go out there without support, you'll be completely cut off." Emma checked a magazine, then clicked it into place. "That's already the case." "That's not how operations work." She finally looked at him. Not harshly, just truthfully. "Out there," she said, "operations don't work the way they're supposed to." He hesitated, then why go? A pause. Emma secured her vest straps. "Because someone has to." That was all. The stealth departure. At 03:17 hours, a black transport helicopter lifted without beacon lights. No identification tags broadcast. No flight path recorded. Inside, the cabin was stripped of anything unnecessary. Only one passenger. Emma Carter. The pilot never turned around. "This flight doesn't exist," he said over the internal comm. "I understand," she replied. Outside the window, the world was a smear of darkness and snowstorms. No cities visible, no landmarks, just endless terrain broken by occasional flashes of distant artillery light. Emma watched it all without expression. Her mind wasn't on fear. It was on timing, distance, probability. The helicopter dipped lower, approaching tree-line altitude. The pilot's voice came through again. 2 minutes to drop zone." Emma checked her gear one final time. Breathing steady. Heartbeat controlled. No hesitation. Not because she was fearless, but because fear had already been processed long before the mission began. It no longer had influence. The drop zone. The aircraft slowed to a hover near a dense, frozen forest line. Wind from the rotors whipped snow into spiraling chaos below. 10 seconds, the pilot said. Emma stood, hooked her rifle strap, rolled her shoulders once. Not to loosen tension, but to lock it in place. 5 seconds. She looked down. Dark forest, no visible movement. Somewhere below, unknown patrol routes, unknown surveillance points, unknown threats. 3. She exhaled slowly. 2. Everything narrowed. Tunnel vision. 1. The door opened. Cold hit instantly, violent, absolute. And Emma Carter stepped out into the night. Into the Warzone. The impact was controlled. Landing clean in deep snow, she rolled once, absorbed force, and came up into a crouch within seconds. The helicopter vanished upward almost immediately, swallowed by clouds and darkness. No trace left behind. Now there was no extraction point. No backup. No comms confirmation. Just silence. Emma activated her wrist display. Static. No satellite link. No friendly network handshake. Only fragmented, environmental data. She scanned the forest line. Nothing visible. But she knew better than to trust that. She adjusted her rifle strap and began moving. Careful. Slow. Intentional. Each step placed with discipline, minimizing sound, minimizing footprint. Above her, wind moved through trees like distant whispers. Then, far off in the distance, a sound. Not natural. A delayed explosion echo. Emma paused, looked toward the direction. That wasn't random artillery. That was active engagement, meaning she wasn't early. She was right on time, and somewhere ahead in the frozen darkness, something was still alive, or still watching. Emma tightened her grip on her weapon and moved forward into the Warzone alone. The forest didn't feel empty. It felt occupied. Even when nothing moved, Emma Carter could sense it, like the air itself had been arranged by someone else. Controlled, measured, watched. Snow fell in thin sheets between towering pines, muting sound, distorting distance. Every step she took disappeared into silence, as if the ground was swallowing evidence. Emma moved with discipline. Low profile, controlled breathing, eyes constantly scanning. Her wrist display flickered faintly, still no satellite link, still no friendly comms, just fragmented terrain data stored locally before insertion. She was alone. Completely. And that was exactly why she was still alive. The first break in silence. Emma stopped. Not because she saw something. Because something changed. A shift in sound frequency. A subtle irregular crunch in the snow ahead, too structured to be wildlife, too soft to be heavy armor. Human movement. Multiple sources. She lowered into a crouch behind a fallen log, snow cold against her gloves. Her hand slid to her rifle without hesitation. Her breathing slowed. Counted. Controlled. Through the trees ahead, shapes emerged. 3 figures. Then 4. Then more. Russian infantry patrol. Moving in a loose sweep formation, scanning the terrain with thermal optics and handheld sensors. Not rushing, not relaxed. Professional. Emma didn't move. Not even her eyes shifted too quickly. One mistake here wouldn't be corrected. One breath too loud could end everything. A soldier paused mid-step, turned slightly, facing her direction. For a moment, the entire forest seemed to freeze. Emma didn't react, didn't tighten, didn't blink. She simply became part of the environment. Snow shadow stillness. The soldier hesitated, then shrugged, turned away. The patrol continued. Footsteps faded deeper into the forest. Only when the sound disappeared completely did Emma exhale, slow, controlled. That was not luck. That was discipline. And it told her something important. They weren't randomly patrolling. They were sweeping patterns. This area was being actively scanned. Which meant one thing. She was inside a monitored kill zone. The distress signal. Emma moved again, faster now, but not reckless. Every few meters, she paused to reassess. Then, a faint signal spike. Her wrist device flickered. Static. Then fragments. If anyone is receiving, repeat, we are pinned. Emma froze instantly. Her head tilted slightly, isolating the direction of the signal. There. Northeast. But it wasn't stable. It was weak, intermittent, like something was interfering with it deliberately. Electronic warfare. Jamming. She narrowed her eyes. That meant the survivors weren't just trapped. They were being actively suppressed, silenced, and probably monitored. Emma followed the signal carefully, adjusting her route in small increments, avoiding open sightlines, avoiding predictable paths. The forest thickened as she advanced. Branches heavier with snow, terrain uneven, old crater marks partially frozen over. Then she saw it. A burnt piece of NATO equipment half buried in ice. Drone wreckage. Recent. Scorch patterns still visible on the metal frame. Emma crouched beside it, scanning quickly. Not random. Precision strike. This drone hadn't crashed. It had been hunted. She ran a quick diagnostic scan using her wrist interface. Last recorded flight path. Grid deviation mid-mission. Sudden signal loss. Then destruction. Emma stood slowly, eyes narrowing. This wasn't just a contested zone. This was a controlled hunting ground. And someone was running the hunt. The trap activates. A faint electronic beep echoed through the trees. Emma's body reacted before thought. She dropped immediately behind a rock formation. Click. A soft mechanical sound beneath the snow. Too late. A hidden proximity trigger had activated. Red laser markers briefly flickered through branches, barely visible in the fog. Then, gunfire erupted. The first volley tore through the space she had just occupied. Snow exploded into the air. Branches snapped violently. Emma rolled sideways, rifle already up, scanning mid-motion. 3 shooters. No 5. Hidden positions. Elevated angles. This wasn't random ambush. This was a prepared kill box. Emma fired once. A suppressed shot cracked softly. One silhouette dropped instantly. No movement. No second chance. The others reacted immediately. Flanking positions engaged. Emma moved again, fast now but controlled. She didn't stay in one place long enough to be targeted twice. Bullets chewed through bark where she had just been standing. She was already gone. Close quarters engagement. One enemy pushed too aggressively through the trees. Mistake. Emma pivoted behind cover, switched to sidearm in one motion and waited. Step. Step. Closer. The soldier appeared at 10 meters. Too close for hesitation. Emma fired twice. Silenced. Down. Another shouted from the left. She didn't look. She moved instead. Using momentum, she closed distance through cover, breaking their line of sight entirely. Another burst of gunfire. Snow flew inches from her shoulder. She ducked, rolled, came up behind a tree trunk and fired upward. Second elevated shooter eliminated. The remaining 2 hesitated. That hesitation cost them. Emma used the gap. One quick advance. One controlled burst. Silence returned. Snow drifted down again, covering fresh disturbance. Emma stood still for a moment. Listening. No movement. No voices. Only wind. But she didn't relax. Not even slightly. Because silence after engagement never meant safety. It meant repositioning. The identification. Emma moved to the closest body, scanning gear quickly. Her eyes stopped. Not standard infantry equipment. Special reconnaissance insignia. Advanced tracking unit. Field sensors integrated into their armor. Emma's expression tightened slightly. These weren't frontline soldiers. They were hunters. And she had just eliminated a tracking cell. Which meant the system now knew something unusual was operating inside their perimeter. And it would respond. Vast. Emma stood slowly, scanning deeper into the forest. Then she saw it. A faint network of signal relays embedded in trees. Camouflage nodes. Active. This wasn't just patrol territory. It was a coordinated surveillance web. She wasn't just being hunted by people. She was being tracked by infrastructure. And somewhere inside that network, something important was being protected. Or hidden. Emma adjusted her rifle and looked deeper into the forest. Her voice was barely audible. All right. A pause. Then she moved forward again. Into the system. into the trap, into whatever was waiting deeper, inside Russian-controlled territory. And now, they knew she was here. The deeper Emma Carter moved into the forest, the more it stopped feeling like terrain and started feeling like a constructed system. Every ridge line looked too deliberate, every clearing too visible. Even the silence between wind gusts felt measured, like someone had designed the battlefield to observe movement, not hide it. Emma slowed her pace, not because she was tired, because she was being studied. Her wrist display flickered again. Weak signal fragments were still coming through, but now they were distorted, layered with interference patterns that weren't random. They were structured, jamming grids, directional. That meant one thing. She was no longer just inside enemy territory. She was inside an active electronic containment zone. The false signal. Emma stopped at the edge of a shallow valley. Snow here was disturbed, subtly compacted, as if heavy equipment had passed recently but tried to erase its tracks. Her visor picked up a faint thermal signature. Flickering. Inconsistent. Human. Emma narrowed her eyes. A survivor signal should have been stronger this close. But this one was too weak. Too unstable. A trap. She crouched behind a ridge, scanning the valley floor carefully. Then she saw it. A partially buried NATO marker flag. Half torn, frozen into the snow. Her instincts tightened. That was not a standard distress placement. That was placed. Emma didn't move forward immediately. Instead, she adjusted her optics. Zoomed. And there, a second signature. Not human. Heat signature clusters. Multiple. Stationary. Waiting. Emma exhaled slowly through her nose. Ambush point. She whispered it under her breath. The signal wasn't a rescue call. It was bait. The moment it activates. A voice crackled suddenly in her calm fragment. If anyone is receiving, we are here, please. Emma froze. The voice sounded real. Panicked. But layered beneath it, she caught it. A repeating loop pattern. Pre-recorded. Broadcast through a directional emitter. Her eyes sharpened instantly. Damn it. She backed up one step. Too late. The valley lit up. Hidden positions activated across the ridge line. Thermal shields dropped. Camouflage nets shifted. Dozens of heat signatures appeared instantly. Not random soldiers. Not patrols. This was a designed kill corridor. Emma dropped instantly behind cover as gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Rocks shattered, snow exploded upward in violent bursts. She rolled hard, coming up behind a broken tree trunk. Rifle up. Scan. Count. Too many. Not 5. Not 10. At least 15 active shooters. All positioned in arcs. Coordinated. This wasn't an ambush squad. It was a containment unit. She was being boxed in. Breaking the kill box. Emma didn't panic. She never did. She moved instead. One shot. Suppressed. A sniper on the ridge dropped. Second shot. A spotter fell backward into snow. The formation reacted instantly, adjusting fire angles, tightening the net. Emma shifted position again. Vast. Controlled. Always moving before they could recalibrate. But the system was learning her pattern. She noticed it immediately. Shots began predicting her movement. Not perfectly, but close enough to force tighter evasion windows. Adaptive tracking, she muttered. They weren't just shooting. They were analyzing. The underground entrance. A sudden explosion rocked the left ridge. Not from Emma, from the enemy's side. A delayed detonation, buried under snow, collapsed part of the terrain. Emma used the chaos instantly. She sprinted downhill through a blind angle, sliding behind a frozen rock formation. And that's when she saw it. A metal hatch, partially exposed, hidden under debris. Emergency markings faded but still visible. NATO Signal Depot Level 2 access. Her eyes locked. So this was it. The missing team's anchor point. She moved quickly, clearing snow from the hatch. Gunfire intensified behind her, enemy units adjusting positions. She pulled the manual release lever. It resisted. Frozen. Locked. She hit it once with the butt of her rifle. Still stuck. More gunfire hit the rock behind her. She hit it again. The mechanism cracked. Steam burst upward. Lock released. The hatch opened with a deep metallic groan. Darkness beneath. No lights. No movement. Just cold air rising from below like a sealed breath finally released. Emma didn't hesitate. She dropped inside. The underground world. The hatch sealed above her automatically. Silence returned instantly. But not peace. Pressure silence. The kind that felt heavier than sound. Emma activated her tactical light. The beam cut through darkness. Concrete tunnel. Reinforced walls. Emergency cables hanging loose. Then, a sound. Not gunfire. Not movement. A cough. Emma raised her rifle instantly. Show yourself. Silence. Then, a weak voice. Don't shoot. From deeper inside the tunnel. Emma advanced carefully. Every step controlled. Corners cleared methodically. Then she saw them. 3 figures. Wounded. Exhausted. NATO insignia. Survivors. One of them lifted his head weakly. Lieutenant Carter. Emma lowered her weapon slightly. Report. The soldier struggled to speak. They didn't just ambush us. They were waiting for us to arrive at this whole sector. Another interrupted, voice shaking. It's a trap network. They're using signal bait, rotating patrol algorithms. They adapt every time. Emma's expression tightened. So it's not just this zone. The first soldier shook his head. It's layered deeper than this bunker. Emma looked down the tunnel. And for the first time, she realized the truth wasn't about rescue. It was about discovery. The enemy command structure. A faint mechanical sound echoed through the walls. Not footsteps. Systems. Activating. One of the survivors whispered urgently. They know you're here now. Emma didn't respond immediately. Instead, she checked her ammo. Then her exits. Then the tunnel depth. Finally, she said, "How many exits?" The soldier hesitated. 1. A pause. Emma nodded slowly. That's not an exit. She looked deeper into the tunnel. That's a funnel. The reveal begins. A distant metallic door at the end of the corridor slowly began to unlock. One by one. Mechanical bolts shifting. Not forced. Not broken. Authorized. Emma raised her rifle again. The survivors backed away. One whispered, "We didn't activate anything." Emma didn't look away from the door. "I know." The final bolt released. The door opened, and cold, artificial light spilled into the tunnel. A voice came through hidden speakers. Calm. Controlled. Almost clinical. "Lieutenant Carter." Emma didn't move. The voice continued. You were not expected to reach this level. A pause. Then, but now that you have, we can proceed with direct observation. Emma's eyes narrowed. Behind the door, something was waiting. Not just soldiers. Not just command. Something that had been watching the battlefield like a system instead of a war. And she had just walked directly into its core layer. The door at the end of the tunnel didn't open like a normal military hatch. It unfolded. Layer by layer, metal panels disengaged with precise mechanical discipline, as if the system behind it wasn't just unlocking a room, but revealing a controlled reality. Cold white light spilled into the underground corridor, washing over Emma Carter and the exhausted NATO survivors behind her. No alarms. No chaos. Just silence. A calculated silence. Emma raised her rifle slightly, not aiming yet, just ready. Because something about this didn't feel like a bunker anymore. It felt like an observation chamber. The voice in the system, the same calm voice, returned through hidden speakers. Lieutenant Carter. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was everywhere at once. Emma didn't respond. The voice continued. You adapted faster than predicted, eliminated multiple tracking nodes, reached a restricted containment level. A pause. Then, you were never meant to enter this deep. Emma's jaw tightened slightly. Behind her, one of the wounded soldiers whispered, This isn't a bunker, what is this place? Emma didn't answer him, because she was already realizing the truth. This wasn't a forward base. This wasn't even a standard military installation. This was something else entirely. A closed-loop battlefield system. The chamber revealed. Emma stepped forward into the chamber. Her boots hit polished, reinforced concrete. The space was enormous, far larger than the tunnel suggested. Walls lined with surveillance panels, tactical maps, shifting data streams. Drones hovered silently near the ceiling, not armed but recording. Watching. Studying. At the center of the room stood a single elevated command platform. And on it, a figure. Not in armor. Not in field gear. Just a uniformed officer standing calmly with hands behind his back. Russian insignia. No urgency. No fear. Only control. The man looked at Emma as if he had been expecting her arrival for a long time. Lieutenant Carter, he said again, this time physically, not through speakers. Emma held her position. Identify yourself. A faint smile. Colonel Victor Orlov. The name carried weight. Emma had heard it in intelligence briefings before, associated with experimental battlefield coordination programs, systems integration, adaptive combat modeling. But those reports had been incomplete, or buried, or denied. Orlov tilted his head slightly. You've been interacting with my system since you entered the forest. Emma's eyes narrowed. This isn't a battlefield, she said slowly. Orlov nodded slightly. No. A pause. It's a simulation layer built on a real one. That statement landed heavier than any gunfire. Behind Emma, one of the survivors shook his head. That's impossible. Orlov didn't look at him. Only Emma. Nothing here is random, he continued. Every patrol, every ambush, every signal you followed, it was all adaptive feedback. Emma's grip tightened slightly on her rifle. You used soldiers as bait. Orlov corrected calmly. I used variables to refine response behavior. A cold realization began forming in Emma's mind. This whole zone is a learning system. Orlov nodded once. Correct. The real war. The room's holographic display activated. Suddenly, the entire battlefield outside appeared: forest, patrol grids, drone paths, kill zones. Then it changed. Lines adjusted in real time. Patterns shifted. Emma's movements were replayed, analyzed, predicted variations calculated instantly. Orlov spoke again. You are the first operator to reach this depth without extraction failure. Emma looked at the display, at herself, at every movement she had made being broken down into data. They weren't trying to stop me, she said quietly. No, Orlov replied. They were learning from you. A pause. Then he added, and you learned from them. Silence filled the chamber. Heavy. Final. Emma finally lowered her rifle slightly. Not surrender. Assessment. Behind her, one of the survivors whispered, Lieutenant, what do we do? Emma didn't answer immediately, because for the first time since she dropped into this war zone, there was no obvious answer. The choice. Orlov stepped forward slightly. This system will continue evolving whether you remain here or not, but you are valuable. Emma looked up sharply. You think I'm a test subject? I think you are an anomaly, Orlov corrected, and anomalies improve systems. A faint hum filled the chamber. Doors locked further behind them. Containment protocol tightening. Emma noticed it instantly. They weren't being invited. They were being contained again. But differently this time. More carefully. More deliberately. Orlov continued. Leave now and you will be extracted. This incident will be classified, forgotten. A pause. Stay, and you will help define the next phase of warfare. Emma stared at him, then at the survivors behind her, then at the data streams surrounding them. Everything here was designed. Everything here had purpose. Except one thing. Sorry. Breaking the system. Emma slowly raised her rifle again. Not toward Orlov, but toward the ceiling. The surveillance nodes. The control network. You made one mistake, she said calmly. Orlov tilted his head slightly. And what is that? Emma's eyes sharpened. You assumed I was part of your system. A split second of silence. Then, she fired. One controlled shot. Then another. Then another. The overhead drone units sparked violently as their systems overloaded. Lights flickered. The chamber stuttered. For the first time, the system didn't respond instantly. Emma moved. Fast. Not toward the exit. Toward the control platform. Orlov stepped back slightly, not panicked but recalculating. You are attempting system disruption, he said calmly. Emma closed distance rapidly. I'm ending it. Alarms finally began to trigger. But delayed. Too slow. The system was learning something it hadn't predicted. Unstructured resistance. Not adaptation. Rejection. Emma reached the base of the platform and fired directly into the control interface. Glass shattered. Panels sparked. The holographic battlefield collapsed into static. Orlov's expression changed for the first time. Not fear. Recognition. You are not responding to optimization logic. Emma looked up at him. I never was. She pulled the final interface cable free. The entire system flickered violently. Then, silence. Complete system blackout. The chamber lights dimmed. Emergency power failed. For a moment, nothing worked. No surveillance. No tracking. No adaptation. Just darkness. Aftermath. Emma stood still in the dark chamber, breathing steady, rifle lowered. Behind her, the survivors slowly realized something. The system wasn't holding them anymore. It was gone. One of them whispered, "Is it over?" Emma didn't answer immediately. She looked toward the sealed exit doors, then at the broken control core. Finally, she said, "For now." A distant rumble echoed above them. The forest, the real world, still out there, still a war zone. But something fundamental had changed. Not the battlefield, the rules behind it. Final scene. As emergency backup system slowly attempted to reboot somewhere deep underground, Emma Carter turned toward the survivors. "Move," she said calmly. "Now." They followed without hesitation. Because whatever this place had been, it no longer mattered. They weren't inside the system anymore. They were outside it, and somewhere far above ground. A war that had been silently observed, optimized, and controlled was suddenly unpredictable again, because one soldier had walked in alone and refused to become part of the experiment.